Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. When we did our live stream on Tuesday afternoon, we talked about so many big games that were going on in Week 8, but as always, we had to figure out our 5 biggest ones to put up here on the big board, and we've got 4 huge ranked versus ranked matchups that will really separate the pretenders from the contenders. That includes 3 teams in the top 6 that are going up against conference foes, and they're going to be really tough tests for them. And then we've got one team that's trying to solidify themselves as a potential college football playoff dark horse. So we're going to go ahead and jump into all of these games and then break down our Heisman watch. As I promised last week, I said we were going to rank our Heisman favorites as of right now entering Week 8, and we'll continue to do this all the way up until the Heisman Trophy is presented in December. So we're going to kick things off with number 6, Michigan, and number 24, Michigan State. A big-time rivalry game, one that's had some great history over the past couple of years. So was it 3 years ago where Michigan had trouble with the snap, and Michigan State took care of business there, and one of the wildest endings you'll ever see in college football. It was just last year that Michigan State was coming off in 2016. It was a 3-9 season, and we really didn't know if Michigan State was back yet. But Mark D'Antonio and his squad went into the big house and took care of business in a big-time upset over the Wolverines. This year, I'm calling for another upset by the Spartans. I know a lot of people will disagree with that, but you look at the two teams. Michigan State's been a team, I think we talked about them on the live stream a little bit, that's been one of the more, just inconsistent teams in all of college football for me. When the season started, I had them pegged as a potential playoff dark horse, definitely a Big Ten title contender, and then in Week 2 they lose to Arizona State. Okay, that's a difficult place to play. It was at night, whatever. And then they lose to Northwestern by 10 points, and I thought, well, that's surely that's the end of it. Spartans are done. We might be looking at another 3-9 season, or maybe not even a bowl berth. And then just last week they go on the road and upset number 8 Penn State on the road in Happy Valley down to the last second. So I'm picking Michigan State in this game. I think that win over Penn State is huge for them to maybe get the ball rolling, because they're not out of the Big Ten title race yet. Michigan, not going to forget about them, number 6 in the nation for a reason. Haven't lost since that season opening loss to Notre Dame. But who has Michigan beat this season to really solidify themselves being, number 6 in the nation? Yes, they lost to Notre Dame, and yes, they annihilated Wisconsin last week. Not taking anything away from that. It was a very impressive victory. I was surprised that they beat them by that much. What was it, 38-13, so a 25-point victory. Very impressed with the Wolverines' performance there. That game was at home, though. Besides that, they annihilated Nebraska and had to come back down, what was it, 17 against a Northwestern team, won that game 20-17, and that game was on the road. I don't know, where to go with this, but I'm giving the edge to the Spartans with it being a home field advantage and coming off that huge win over Penn State. Michigan's coming off a huge win too, but I'm leaning more towards the Spartans in this one. Rivalry games, anything can happen. This would be a huge boost for Michigan State in conference standings to try to keep their Big Ten title hopes alive. Number 16, North Carolina State. Number 3, Clemson. Like Michigan and Michigan State, some great games over the past couple years between these two squads. Last year, North Carolina State at home was actually beating Clemson 21-17 at halftime. Ended up blowing their lead, losing that game 38-31. So a very, very close game that could have derailed Clemson's entire season. That would have been a major upset, and actually could have put North Carolina State in a spot to maybe compete for the college football playoff. We weren't able to get the job done there. 2016, they couldn't get the job done either at Clemson in Death Valley. Had a 33-yard chip shot field goal that they missed and ended up losing 24-17 in overtime. A very heartbreaking loss for the Wolfpack, and obviously that was what kind of sparked Clemson's national championship run. They lose that game, probably not going to be going to the national championship. But this game, huge, because both teams are coming off bye weeks. I'm very excited to watch the quarterback battle between these two squads. Ryan Finley at North Carolina State, arguably one of the better quarterbacks in the entire nation. Sure, he's not up here on the Heisman watch, but in terms of accuracy and consistency, he's 100%, I think, probably the best quarterback in the ACC, if not one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC, certainly in the nation. It's 1,621 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions on the year, always consistent. And then Clemson, you've got Trevor Lawrence. As we all know, Kelly Bryant deciding to transfer. So how will Trevor Lawrence respond? He had a bye week coming off that injury. I know he got hurt against Syracuse, then they took care of Wake Forest, and then they got a bye week coming into this game. It's at home. I'm picking Clemson. They're up, I think, a 17-point favorite going into this game. North Carolina State, not going to go down without a fight. Absolutely not. And if they can shut down Trevor Lawrence, Clemson's going to have to rely on Travis Etienne, who as a matter of fact, has 761 yards and 11 touchdowns on the year. So Clemson relying more on that run game, very dangerous there. But I think the Wolfpack will give them a fight there, but I just don't think it's going to be enough because North Carolina State does not have as big of a resume or as solid of wins as Clemson has. They haven't faced as tough as tests as Clemson has yet. That West Virginia game got canceled. I think that would have been a really good metric to see where North Carolina State's at. But maybe we'll get that one here on Saturday. And then that night, we got number 22 Mississippi State and number 5 LSU, a big-time SEC showdown between two squads that are still, in the hunt to finish very high up in the SEC West. More so for LSU than Mississippi State, who has already lost twice this season. But ESPN used a very good word for Mississippi State. They are rejuvenated. They lose big time to Kentucky. Then they lose back at home to Florida. But then come off that Florida loss and beat Auburn by 14 points, 23-9, where Nick Fitzgerald, of course, broke the record. So rejuvenated, I think, is the best word for Mississippi State right now. They are coming off a bye week, coming into this huge game at Death Valley. LSU, though, coming off a 20-point victory over number 2 Georgia. I can't fathom picking Mississippi State in this game. I did last year and nailed that pick. Just want to throw that one out there once again. 37-7 was last year's score, but you look at the revenge factor for LSU, the way they took care of Georgia, something that Mississippi State could not have done. This game being at night at Death Valley, I don't see any way Mississippi State's going to come in here and take care of business and win this game. I think Nick Fitzgerald could put up some big numbers. LSU's defense is once again have to step up against a very solid dual threat quarterback, but I think in the end the Tigers get the job done. Could potentially slip into the top 4 if they take care of business handily. They'll have a bye week before that November 3rd showdown against Alabama, which probably will determine who wins the SEC West. So a huge game there. Number 12, Oregon. Number 25, Washington State. This is where College Game Day is going this week. For the first time ever, they are going to Pullman to see to the home of the Cougars, and I think that's really cool. I addressed this maybe in the live stream, maybe somewhere else, that if you've watched College Game Day, you always see that Washington State flag flying somewhere in the background, right behind all the analysts up there. And so the fact they're finally going to Pullman, finally going to Washington State, I think that's really neat and huge. If you haven't seen the video of the welcome that Washington State gave it when the trucks came in for game day, you need to go check that out. They are excited. They're hyped. It's going to be an electric atmosphere, but it's going to be a loss. I think it's going to be a loss for the Cougars, unfortunately, because the biggest thing for me is the resume for Washington State right now. They are a good team, without a doubt. Mike Leach has done a phenomenal job, doing way better than I expected them to be. But who have they played to the type of caliber as Oregon? They beat Utah by 4 points, and Utah is slowly rising, and we're going to talk about them in a second. They are certainly peaking at the right time. They lost to USC by 3, so a very tough test there. That was on the road, so they gave them a good fight there. But besides that, they haven't played a team that's even close to the caliber and to the talent level as Oregon. Oregon's coming off a huge win at home in overtime over Washington, so they're high off of that win. Oregon can't afford to overlook that. Usually sometimes teams coming off a big win tend to just kind of overlook the next team. They're going to be looking far ahead, or they'll think, oh, we already beat Washington or someone high up there in the top 10. We don't have to worry about these guys. The toughest tests are out of the way. I know Washington State will be hyped for this game, and this reminds me a lot of the scenario last year, Friday night game, Washington State hosting USC. What was USC ranked number 4 at the time? And they took care of business and won that game and spearheaded a top 10 jump for the Cougars. I just don't think it's going to happen this time. I don't think they're going to have enough talent on the defensive side of the ball to shut down Justin Herbert and this Oregon offense. I think Mario Cristobal and his squad get a huge win on the road, a good resume-building win along with that Washington win, and they could maybe slip into the college football playoff if they win out, including a Pac-12 championship game, win. So we'll have to wait and find that out, but this is going to be a very, very big one. Make sure you don't miss this. If you don't want to watch it, at least watch College Game Day because it's going to be a heck of an environment. Then our last game, USC at Utah, the only game up here not including ranked teams. Those were only 4 ranked versus ranked matchups. This game big. Why? Because of the implications in the Pac-12 South. This game, I think, will determine who wins that division. I know some people will say, well, hold up. Let's talk about Colorado for a second. Listen to these standings right now. The standings, as of right now, entering Week 8. USC leads the South with a 3-1 conference record. Colorado right behind at 2-1. And Utah right behind at 2-2. If Utah is to beat USC, because I do not think Colorado will go on the road and beat Washington, do not see that happening. If this everything goes the way according to plan, Utah will then jump to first at 3-2, USC right behind them at 3-2, Colorado at 2-2. And I'm not saying Utah is going to win out after this game, but I think this is going to give them the head-to-head tiebreaker over USC if it comes to that. They still have a date against Colorado that they might be able to win that one as well. Utah peaking at the right time, as I mentioned, annihilating Arizona State, who is struggling mightily this season. Very disappointing year for Kevin Sumlin and his squad. Annihilating Stanford, a team that has tanked, nothing that we expected out of them this season. USC, on the other hand, only has 2 losses to Stanford back when they were looking good, and to Texas, who's looking great right now. I just don't think they're going to have enough to go on the road. Utah is peaking at the right time, and teams with this type of momentum usually don't get stopped in their tracks, immediately, especially with this game being at home, especially with the implications riding on this game. I think Utah takes care of business in this one, and what should be a very, very exciting Pac-12 After Dark game. So make sure you keep your eye on that one. But I think the Utes get the win there, and the Utes were my pick, I believe, to win the Pac-12 South. I'm pretty sure, or maybe it was Arizona. I can't recall, but I did have them going 9-3 or 10-2. So I did have them having a very solid season. Nonetheless, huge win for both, or huge game for both of these schools. Edge going to the Utes. Heisman watch. Real quick, we'll break this down. And one thing I want to ask you guys: do you want to see a video dedicated to the Heisman watch? We can break down these guys a little bit more analysis on these guys instead of spending like 4 or 5 minutes on these guys. So would you want to see a whole video? Maybe address that in the live stream, something like that. Leave your comments below. We want to hear from you guys. Any suggestions you may have for more content coming your way. But these are the rankings that we've gotten. I've repeatedly said it's the year of the quarterback. I don't see any running back that should be thrown into the mix in the Heisman watch, at least in the top 4 for now. Number 1, without a doubt, Tua Tagovailoa. And people can make a case for Dwayne Haskins being above him, but listen to these stats by Tagovailoa. Last week against Missouri, 265 yards and 3 touchdowns. And that was before he went out with an injury. I think it was to his knee. On the year, 1,760 yards, 21 touchdowns, no interceptions, and just 35 incompletions. So they've played 7 games, and he's only thrown 35 incompletions. He's averaging 5 incompletions a game. That's unheard of by a quarterback. It's extremely impressive. And no interceptions, you should add. With that, for me, it's a no-brainer. That Tagovailoa is number 1 right now. Now, the case for Dwayne Haskins is the stats are a little bit better. 2,331 yards on the year, 28 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Against Minnesota last week, he had 412 yards to the air and 3 touchdowns. And ESPN tried to make a case saying, well, listen to this. You've got Dwayne Haskins, who has come from behind victories against TCU, a decent squad at the time, and Penn State on the road. Very, very impressive. And he's playing the entire game. But my argument would be Tua Tagovailoa is playing so well that he doesn't have to play the entire game. Maybe the competition is not as great that Alabama's gone up against, sure, but he hasn't played in the 4th quarter yet. And he's putting up complete game stats in just like a half or maybe 3 quarters. To me, it's a no-brainer for Tagovailoa to be up there. Dwayne Haskins right behind, putting up some amazing stats for Ohio State. I'd love to see these 2 quarterbacks go at it. But ESPN makes a solid point there, but I still think Tagovailoa should own the edge. Kyler Murray down at number 3, and in my opinion, it really is just Tagovailoa and Haskins. Those are the top 2 right now, unless Kyler Murray and Will Grier start stepping it up a little bit. Kyler Murray, good stats, 1,764 yards, 21 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 377 yards on the ground, and 5 touchdowns on the year. There, he's the Sooners' leading rusher right now. They had a bye week after that loss to Texas where he didn't play well but didn't play bad either. So I have him at 3rd, certainly above Will Grier. Someone made a comment and said, well, I wonder where you're going to have Will Grier on the Heisman watch. Well, he's last out of my group of quarterbacks because, he was my favorite going into the year. I really, really wanted to see some good stuff out of him. He's played well. 1,919 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. But over the past 2 games against Kansas, he had 4 total turnovers, 3 interceptions, and a lost fumble. And this past week against Iowa State, which they lost by 16, only 100 yards to the air, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. So he's committed 5 turnovers in his past 2 games. That game against Kansas, they play anybody else, West Virginia loses that game because Kansas, wasn't able to take advantage of the opportunities of those turnovers that Will Grier committed. Any other team would have, I believe, and they would have lost that game. And then they obviously lost to Iowa State. He did not play well. And Iowa State, tough place to play, a good team. But when you're a Heisman contender and you're as good as Will Grier, you've got to play a little bit better than that to help your team have a chance to win those games. Will Grier is last right now because of the performance he's had in the past 2 games. 1 performance, even 2, does not kick you out of the Heisman race, but it certainly sends your stock going down. And that's why he's number 4 right now. I think it's a no-brainer that right now it's Tua Tagovailoa and Dwayne Haskins, 1 and 2. It's going to be a battle between those 2 for who wins the Heisman unless Kyler Murray and Will Grier start to step up, and especially in big-time games. And they certainly have the opportunity to do that. Will Grier still has dates against Oklahoma and Texas. Kyler Murray, obviously, against West Virginia, TCU this week. So these guys still have opportunities to do it, and Tagovailoa and Haskins still have time to screw up. It's still a long ways away until this Heisman Trophy is presented, but for right now, these are our top 4 in order of our Heisman candidates. So as always, please go check us out on Twitter at Gridiron Expert. Check us out on Predictive. We haven't put a lot of content out there yet, but continue to check that out. That'll be in the bio, in the description below. And always here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on the Gridiron Expert.